Are we beginning to look at the possibility of cutting back on your expenses, which you tried to talk about earlier on? Do you think the government, right now we're all looking towards the 2015 general election, but nothing has been said as to plans to cut back, because we have the MTEF, that's medium-term expenditure framework, and the fiscal strategy paper being submitted to the National Assembly by the President. But do you think that the document should be adjusted in a way to accommodate the present realities in the economy?
I believe very strongly that those documents should be reworked. Reworked because all the projections forward don't indicate the price of crude oil staying where it is at the present moment. I don't see it being sustained at $80-something per barrel. I see it going down to 70s. There's the possibility it might even go down to $50 per barrel, talking about the medium term. So in which case, we should be asking ourselves that if the revenue from crude oil is not there, can this economy survive? And that is why we should also seriously begin to address our expenditure profile. There's still a lot of waste in public expenditure in Nigeria, and that is an area we should begin to cut back. Even talking about saving for the rainy day, that is the excess crude account. The reality today is that the lower the price of crude oil gets, the shorter and thinner that margin is that actually creates the ECA for you. So you will get to a point where the margin will disappear, because what goes in there is simply the difference between your benchmark assumption for your budget and the reality of the market price. So once market price drops, that margin will thin out. And when it thins out, there's nothing to add to the ECA account. Okay? So, and let's not also forget that even that account itself was almost depleted. Because initially, when the price of crude oil was coming down, we did not realize that we should actually begin to cut back on expenditure. But rather, we went to dipping our hands into what we had put aside in this year to now shore up allocations so that we can maintain allocations at the same level or close to it. So we have not actually gotten to a point where we recognize that what goes into the excess crude account is not actually money to be spent now. It's actually money that should be invested and committed to the future. So and that is why before any little crisis in the oil market happens, that excess crude account is depleted. So and that is a major, major worry for me as an analyst.
Okay. Now some people have talked about that we may have to borrow more going forward. Talking about widening the budget deficit, but when we compare this with the fact that the value of the currency may be affected going by the declining oil prices, we're already seeing that impact already. How do we manage the situation when we talk about the value of a foreign exchange and the fact that we have to borrow more? Are we going to be paying more in terms of interest over time because of the situation?
Well, the reality now is that for you to even borrow more, whoever you want to borrow from will also consider your capacity to pay. So in which case, we look at where you are currently, and the reality we must tell ourselves is that today, the sovereign debt of Nigeria is much greater than where we were when we did the Paris Club negotiation. That's the reality. In terms of structure, yes, it has changed. We have a lot more now in domestic debt than what we had then. It was dominated then by external debt. But now domestic debt is much greater than external debt. But even at that, external debt has almost doubled in the last 4 years. And that is from around $5 billion to over $8 billion, going to $9 billion. Now, if you look at that, it means that you are growing your external debt aggressively in all reality. But we also keep allowing ourselves to be deceived by the macroeconomic indices of our ability that we can afford it. So because once you look at debt sustainability ratio, that's why I call it macroeconomic indices. That ratio will tell you that you still have capacity to borrow more. So you go on the illusion that there's capacity to borrow more, but you are not considering the future of how you are going to repay it. Of course, repayment is a major issue on two planks, repayment of the principal and servicing, as you mentioned, the interest. Now, it might appear that you can still generate the revenue with which you will service it. But again, look at the breakdown of the budget. how much is in that budget for debt servicing? It again wouldn't make any economic sense, because you borrow, and then we ask ourselves, what did you do with the money? Really, borrowing, there's no problem with borrowing. But if you borrow for the purpose of empowering economic actors, and that means if you borrow strictly for infrastructure, but if you borrow to show up what you consume now, then you are not helping the economy.
Now, I know that the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank will be meeting anytime soon. What do you think could be the policy direction for this committee?
Well, as it is, and we must be very blunt with ourselves, there's no how the Naira can remain at the current value. So that means I expect that one of the key decisions the MPC will make is that the official rate, the Naira dollar exchange rate, as well as with other major trading currencies of Nigeria, we have to move from where it is. And that is, foreign currencies will become more expensive. Now, the reality is that, as of today, if you want to buy the US dollar by the roadside, it will cost you about 172 to 174 Naira to get a dollar. Now, if you go to the central bank to buy the official rate, you get that at less than 160 Naira to a dollar. Now, that gives you a premium that is by far greater than 5%, which is the recommended maximum benchmark internationally. So now, once it goes beyond that, it means there's an incentive for round tripping, whichever way it goes. So now, I expect the MPC to come with a decision that will move that benchmark rate. Of course, the budget for this year says 160 Naira to a dollar. That's the budget for 2014. But in my own estimation, I see us going beyond that in order to narrow that gap, that premium.
Biodun Adedipe, for your time with us. We do appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The Central Bank of Nigeria unveils the new 100 Naira commemorative note to mark the centenary celebration. CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele talks about the significance of the note.
There are many different examples of countries that have issued notes for different reasons. For instance, Morocco issued new currency to celebrate its 25 years of the country's banknote production company. Russia recently also issued banknotes to mark 100 days before the 2014 Olympics. Costa Rica issued new banknotes to celebrate 100 years of its independence. In issuing this note, Mr. President, the Central Bank of Nigeria is joining the nation in celebrating 100 years of our amalgamation. In keeping with Central Bank's tradition of excellence, we have produced a banknote which is the first of its kind in many respects, but most importantly, that it has been designed and produced with most advanced security technology in the world.
The Nigeria-British Chamber of Commerce is seeking ways to improve bilateral trade relation between Nigeria and the United Kingdom. The Chamber is of the view that the private sector can tap into the huge benefits of the non-oil sector of the Nigerian economy. The centenary lecture in commemoration of Nigeria's 100 years of economic relations with the UK. The chairman of the chamber, Dr. Ernest Shonekon, identifies the need for investors to switch the line of business from oil.
Nigeria take advantage of the strong trading relations to think of preferential assets for the development of processed agricultural units and manufactured through materials in the United. At the same time, British investors need to explore the Nigerian market for more businesses.
Sharing the same opinion, the Chamber's President in Council and invited guest speaker calls for the mobilization of the private sector to increase the value of trades between the UK and Nigeria.
It will also be important for government to mobilize and involve the organized private sector in the initiation and implementation of economic policies. Nigeria's first integrated petrochemical refinery is
due to come on stream in 2018, and that should signal the end of importation of finished petroleum products into Nigeria. What this means is that the UK and UK companies need to begin to rethink their investments strategy in Nigeria.
The British High Commissioner to Nigeria, Dr. Andrew Pocock, dwells on the need for Nigeria to spread up on its non-oil sector development.
Nigeria's economy is beginning to change. Your very energetic and impressive agriculture minister sees agriculture rightly as something that should move from a subsistence activity to a business and commercial one, and as the only real employer of scale available in this country in the next few years. And again, we can help add value to the agricultural area, but that needs to happen quickly.
The event also adds the launch of a scheme, the Export Nigeria Initiative. This aims to provide logistics support for entrepreneurs in the area of commodities export to the UK. On that note, we wrap up the program. Thank you for staying tuned. We do appreciate your comments. Please do keep them coming. I am Bolaji Akinwale.